Patel.
Set this timer. All right, everyone. Hi, my name is Joe Breda, and I'm from the University of Washington, where I work with Shwetek Patel in the UbiComp lab. And today I'm going to be talking about FeverPhone, which is an accessible core body temperature sensing app using commodity smartphones. So let's talk about the problem. Basically, thermometers are used for measuring fever, which is the primary indicator for most influenza-like illnesses. And they are purpose-specific devices, which are somewhat inconvenient to acquire. People often forget to buy them until it's too late and they already have a fever and they're sick, and then they don't want to go out and buy one. And they're also somewhat unintuitive to use. Most people use them wrong, leading to high error in practice. But the exact same hardware that's present in most digital thermometers is present in most smart devices. And so harnessing the ubiquity of this thermistor, the thermally sensitive resistor that's built into smart devices, could allow for scaling thermometry to basically any smartphone user. So what we do is we create a smartphone or a software-defined thermometer using the hardware that's already available on smartphones that are distributed in the population. So some background on how thermometry works. Essentially what happens is a thermal probe is brought into contact with a user's body, usually under their tongue, in their armpit, on their forehead, and basically just measures the rate of heat transfer from the user's body to the device. And then through some kind of transfer function, which can be theoretically defined or learned, and sort of depends on the location on the body where you're measuring and also the type of thermometer, estimates your core body temperature from that rate of change. And so what we do is we actually replicate that exact same process using a smartphone. So we model a thermometer using a smartphone, just bringing it in contact with the user's body and measuring the rate of heat change across the interaction, and then learn empirically this transfer function to estimate core body temperature. Obviously, you would imagine that there's some challenges here. Notably, a thermometer is a purpose-specific device where the probe is sort of designed for good thermal conductivity and isolated from environmental factors, whereas a smartphone has this thermistor sort of buried within the chassis in between heat-generating components and sort of positioned somewhere in the device. And so we have to figure out a way to model that and sort of extract the core body signal from the sensor that's not originally designed to do that. So some early experiments showed that when you bring the phone in contact with the user's body, what you see is an inverse exponential curve like this, where after about 8 minutes of contact, the temperature of the thermistor sort of equilibrates with the core body temperature of the user, which is we found to be like basically the same as the temperature of the user's forehead. And we found that with warmer foreheads or warmer people with warmer core body temperatures, this point where the temperature converges to after 8 minutes obviously increases. But we don't want to wait 8 minutes to get a measurement. And so we actually just looked at the first 90 seconds of contact. So the user brings the phone in contact with their forehead. And you see that over this 90 seconds, the rate of transfer from the user's forehead to the phone is actually roughly linear. And so you can actually just fit this like a linear curve to this first 90 seconds and map features describing this line of linear best fit to the temperature that it would converge to given the full 8 minutes of data collection. And so, once we have this sort of representation of this Newton's law of cooling, which is summarized in a briefer duration of time using this linear line of best fit, we can still learn that transfer function empirically, mapping that sort of summarization of Newton's law of cooling to the actual core body temperature of the users measured by like state-of-the-art oral thermometer. But what if people have different sized foreheads? So we thought of that. The smartphone that's being brought in contact with the user has a touch sensor built in, obviously, and it's a capacitive sensor matrix that gives you sort of a map of like what's touching it and where on the device. And so if you put your thumb against a smartphone screen, what you'll see is a blob of capacitance roughly the size and shape of your thumb. And if you bring your forehead in contact with the smartphone screen, you'll see a blob roughly the size and shape of the contact between your phone, the phone and your forehead. And we expect that an increased contact area will also increase the heat exchange from the user's body to the smartphone. And so our full system looks something like this. So you take the phone, bring it to your forehead, leave it in contact for 90 seconds, and we extract two signals, the thermistor time series and the raw capacitive touchscreen signal. And from those sort of raw signal, we extract further features summarizing those time series. From the thermistor time series, we get our rate of change of this linear curve for the first 90 seconds, and also the initial temperature of the device. And then from the raw capacitance, we extract the location, which is sort of the centroid of this blob of capacitance, and the amount, which is the sort of amount of capacitance above a certain threshold to be considered like the touch area. And from that, we use these four features to just create a regression model to predict temperature. We evaluated this process in both a lab setting and in a clinical setting. In the lab setting, we used a sous vide, which, if you're not familiar, it's a cooking device used to control, precision control the temperature of water. And we basically set this sous vide in increments of 0.5 degrees Celsius and brought the smartphone in contact with this temperature-controlled bag of water to sort of simulate a human body at different core body temperatures for 90 seconds, waiting about 15 minutes between trials to make sure the whole system, both the phone and the bag of water, equilibrate back to a state that's not like post heat transfer. And then simply just fit a lightweight model such as like a random forest model to the data. And what we find is sort of expected observations. Firstly, if the initial temperature of the smartphone is already somewhat warm, then you're going to see less heat transfer because it's already warm, and heat transfers faster from two entities that are further apart in temperature. More contact between this bag of water and the smartphone screen results in more heat transferred. And sort of the location matters. We don't know where the thermistor is in the device because that's proprietary, but we know that where the location is along the device affects the rate of heat transfer, and we assume that's sort of proximity to the thermistor. And lastly, most importantly, more heat exchange occurs when the body is warmer. And so I have all of these confounder experiments, and I won't go into them. I encourage you to read the paper, but we explored generalizability across phones, phones of the same make and model, different make, different model, also different accessories like phone screens and phone cases, different pressures of contact, and also different temperatures of the environment where the evaluation was conducted, and found that while it doesn't immediately generalize to these confounder cases, using a little calibration by introducing some data from the confounded state to the original data set actually helps generalize quite well. And lastly, we brought this into an emergency room at the University of Washington and deployed this with real people and found, conducted some more ablation study type tests, looked at different combinations of features, different durations of data collection and different models, and found we were able to predict core body temperature to about 1/4 degree Celsius. And with that, I'm 5 seconds away from finishing, so thank you. This is my authors. Thank you to my collaborators and you guys for listening.
Thank you for the great talk. I have a question. It was great to see that you took into account physiological features in the model development, such as the size of the forehead. I was wondering, similar to the ablation studies you conducted for the phone type, have you conducted ablation studies with regards to how your model performs on people with smaller foreheads? Could be an indication of age, for example, versus larger foreheads, and if so, what were the results? So by incorporating essentially this consideration, did you gain on performance?
Yeah, so we didn't conduct an ablation study on the actual size of the forehead itself, but just from experience looking at the data, we did find that the size of the forehead affected it affected the model performance, and also the touch area sort of summarizes the size of the forehead in a way, because someone with a smaller forehead will actually, or smaller and also like more rounded, like curved foreheads tend to make less contact, whereas like a flatter forehead makes more contact. And so the hope is really that like the model is able to learn from those touch-based features to work across foreheads and more so generalize. But yeah, you're right. Doing a ablation study with different types of foreheads would have also helped.
Yeah, thank you for the great presentation. I was wondering, what's the minimum difference to the ambient temperature? How far away can this be from the body temperature in order for this to work? Because if the ambient temperature is very close to your body temperature, there's not going to be a heat transfer, I presume.
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the experience that we ran, we did everything in sort of a nominal indoor environment, and the warmest temperatures were around like 78 degrees. So it's sort of a known limitation with actually like state-of-the-art thermometers too, that if the ambient temperature is like well over 100 degrees, the probe is already going to be hot too. And so this is sort of a limitation across all temperature sensors in general, not just this device. But yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yep.